The call dropped at 11:47 p.m. I stared at my phone screen, battery at 3%, the little red sliver mocking me, and I understood with absolute clarity that my wife had just left me to die in a snowstorm southwest. She could drive her deputy home. Not because she had to. Because she chose to. The temperature had already dropped to 14 degrees, and I was standing on the side of Highway 9 in dress shoes, a blazer, and the kind of thin slacks you wear to a military spouse banquet, not the kind you wear when you're facing a 2-mile walk through a whiteout blizzard. My car had slid into the drainage ditch 40 minutes earlier. I'd called Rebecca 3 times before she picked up, and when she did, I could hear Captain Derek Holloway's voice in the background, low and familiar, the way voices sound in enclosed spaces. In her car. In the warm, running car she was driving instead of coming to get me. "Liam, I can't just leave him stranded," she'd said. "He rode with someone else to the banquet and they already left. I'm his commanding officer. I have a responsibility." "Becca," I said, and I remember how steady my voice was, which surprised me. "I'm in a ditch on Highway 9. It's below freezing. I'm in a suit. I'll come right after I drop him off. 20 minutes, okay. Just stay in the car where it's warm." The car wasn't warm anymore. The car was in a ditch at a 30-degree angle, and after 30 minutes the heater had quit because I'd been afraid of carbon monoxide backup from the exhaust being partially buried. I told her this. "Liam, just give me 40 minutes. I promise." And then the call dropped, and my phone died, and 40 minutes became forever. I started walking. That was the decision that changed everything. Not the divorce filing, not the conversation that came 3 days later, not the evidence I eventually gathered or the cold, precise way I dismantled the life we'd built together. The decision that started all of it was simply putting one foot in front of the other on a snow-covered highway at midnight, alone, because the woman who had promised to choose me, above all others, had made her choice and it wasn't me. I want to be honest about what I felt during those 2 miles. I've thought about it enough to be precise. The first half-mile was fear, genuine, animal fear, because it was dark and the wind was cutting through my blazer like it was tissue paper and I couldn't feel my left ear. The second half-mile was something colder than the air around me. By the time I saw the lights of the Sunoco station at the intersection of routes 9 and 14, the fear was gone entirely and what was left in its place was something I'd never felt before in 11 years of marriage. I was done. Not angry. Not devastated. Done. Like a calculation that had finally finished running. Rebecca and I had met during her second year at the academy. I was in my 3rd year of an engineering degree at State, and my college roommate dragged me to a party thrown by one of the junior cadets. She was standing near the fireplace in civilian clothes, and she looked southwest out of place, too intense, too alert, like a person who'd wandered into the wrong movie, that I walked straight over and told her she looked like she was running threat assessments on everyone in the room. She said she was. I loved her immediately. We dated through her remaining academy years and my senior year, survived the long-distance stretch when she was deployed for her first posting, and got married in a small ceremony the month after she was promoted to captain. I restructured my career around her postings. When she transferred to Fort Kellerman, I found remote contract work. When she transferred again 18 months later, I packed my home office and followed. I gave up a partnership opportunity at an engineering firm in Portland because the timing conflicted with her command review board, and I made that sacrifice without hesitation because I believed, completely, the way you believe in gravity, that I was the most important thing in her world. I was wrong about that, and the evidence had been accumulating in ways I'd been too trusting to register. Captain Derek Holloway had arrived at Fort Kellerman 8 months earlier as Rebecca's new deputy. He was younger than her by 3 years, charismatic in the easy way of people who've never had to work at charm, and Rebecca talked about him constantly. At the time I read this as professional enthusiasm. She was proud of her unit. She was proud of the people she developed. That was who she was. But I remembered, thawing out under the Sunoco station's fluorescent lights while a teenager behind the counter watched me with nervous sympathy and handed me a cup of coffee without being asked, the way she'd laughed on the phone with him 2 weeks earlier. I'd walked into the kitchen and she'd turned her back to me. I'd thought nothing of it. I'd poured myself a glass of water and gone back to my desk, because that's the kind of husband I was. Trusting. Present but undemanding. Content. I thought about the overnight training exercise 2 months back that she'd returned from quiet and softer-eyed than usual. I'd told myself she was tired. I thought about the Saturday 3 weeks ago when she'd said she was going to the base gym and came back 4 hours later with dry hair. I hadn't asked. I'd just been glad she seemed relaxed. And now this. I borrowed the kid's phone charger, he had the same model, and plugged mine in behind the counter. It blinked to life with 3 missed calls. All from Rebecca, the first coming 12 minutes after the call dropped, the last 45 minutes after that. There was a voicemail. Liam, I'm on Highway 9, I don't see your car, where are you? Please call me back. I don't know where you are. Please call. She sounded frightened. I noticed that I felt nothing. I called my friend Garrett instead. He'd known me since college, was the kind of person who answered phones at midnight without complaint, and when I told him where I was, he said he'd be there in 22 minutes and hung up without a single unnecessary question. That's a real person. I sat on a plastic chair near the chip display and I let myself understand, for the first time without flinching, exactly what my marriage was. It was 11 years of me choosing her and 2 hours of her choosing him. When Garrett arrived, he took one look at me, the wet blazer, the blue-tinged fingers wrapped around the coffee cup, the expression on my face, and said nothing except, "Get in." He turned the heat to maximum and drove me to his house and gave me a sweatshirt and a couch and the silence I needed. He was a good man. He remained one throughout everything that followed. My phone kept buzzing. I turned it face down and let it buzz. Rebecca came home the next morning to find me sitting at the kitchen table with the calm that I think must have frightened her more than anger would have. I'd been up since 5. I'd made coffee. I'd sat and thought for 3 hours with the specific cold clarity that comes after you've already made the decision and you're just waiting for the conversation to catch up. She walked in at 7:15, still in the clothes from the night before, and stopped when she saw me. Liam. She crossed the room quickly. I looked everywhere on that highway. I called you 40 times, you dropped me at 11:47, I said. You arrived at my car, which was in the ditch, at 12:32. That's 45 minutes. It's a 9-minute drive from Derek's apartment to Highway 9. Where were the other 36 minutes, Becca? The color left her face in a way I'd remember for a long time. I drove the wrong stretch, I thought you'd be further north, you were at his apartment for 36 minutes, I said. After you dropped him off. Before you came looking for me. I didn't, Liam, that's not, I walked 2 miles in 14-degree weather in dress shoes, I said, still in the same level voice. I have frostbite on my left ear. I couldn't feel my hands for an hour. And you were at his apartment for 36 minutes. She sat down across from me. I watched her face cycle through calculations, and I recognized in that moment that she was deciding how much I could prove and how much she could safely deny, and that recognition, the sight of my wife doing math on what she could get away with, was worse than everything else. Nothing happened, she said finally. I just went in for a minute. We were both shaken up from the accident. Yours. He was worried. We just talked. Derek was worried about me. He was worried about the situation. What's his girlfriend's name? I asked. He's been with her for 6 months now. Pretty girl, works at the hospital. You introduced us at the Halloween party. Natalie, Rebecca said, without thinking, and then heard herself. Did Natalie know Derek had company at 12:30 in the morning? Silence. How long? I asked. Liam, I'm going to ask you one more time and then I'm going to call a lawyer instead. How long? She covered her face with her hands. And I sat very still and waited while my wife, my major, decorated, respected, the woman I'd followed from state to state like her shadow, broke down across a kitchen table I'd assembled from flat-packed boxes on a Saturday afternoon 3 years ago. Crying into her hands in a house that I had organized, decorated, maintained, cleaned, and made livable while she built a career. 4 months, she said. I stood up and walked to the bedroom and started packing a bag. Wait, Liam, wait, please, I'm not going to yell at you, I said, because I'd thought about this during the 5 hours I'd been awake, and I knew who I wanted to be in this moment. I'm not going to make a scene. But I am leaving this house today, and you should call your JAG officer this week because you're going to need one. JAG, what? You're not, Liam, we can go to counseling, we can, you left me on a highway. I turned around and looked at her and said it very plainly, so there was no possibility of misunderstanding. You knew where I was. You knew what the temperature was. You drove to his apartment and you stayed for 36 minutes while I walked 2 miles alone in the dark and the cold. That's not a mistake I can counsel my way past. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. I zipped my bag. I loved you completely, I said. There isn't anything I wouldn't have done for you. You knew that and you used it and I'm done. I walked out of the kitchen. She was saying my name and I kept walking and I didn't look back, not once, because I had walked 2 miles in a snowstorm and I knew how to keep moving. I moved in with Garrett. I called a divorce attorney named Patricia Chen, who was methodical and formidable and took one look at the documented timeline I'd brought to our first meeting and said, "You've already done most of my job." I had. Those 5 quiet hours at the kitchen table had been productive. For the first week I let myself be a wreck, in private, in Garrett's spare room. I wasn't performing dignity, I was just limiting my audience. I had known this woman for 11 years. I had built a life that orbited hers, and the collapse of that gravity took something out of me that I'm not sure ever fully grew back the same way, though what grew in its place was stronger. I cried more than I expected to. I slept badly. I went over memories looking for the moments I'd missed and found them scattered everywhere, obvious in retrospect, invisible in the original context because I had been too fundamentally trusting to apply a suspicious lens to the woman I loved. That was the grief, and I let myself have it, and then I stopped. The cold thing that had replaced the fear on Highway 9 was still there, steady and patient, and after a week it took over from the grief and I let it. I started making calls. Garrett's neighbor was a CPA named Dennis who'd been through a divorce 3 years prior and knew every financial move in the playbook. I sat at Garrett's dining table for 6 hours one Saturday while Dennis walked me through everything: joint assets, the accounts Rebecca controlled that I technically co-owned, the retirement accounts, all of it. I am an engineer. I understand systems. I began to understand this one with the same methodical focus I brought to load-bearing calculations. Rebecca had, during our marriage, managed most of the household finances because it was easier. I had trusted this. She had, it turned out, gradually shifted the nominal control of several joint assets into structures that would have made a clean split complicated. Not illegal. Just strategically positioned. Patricia reviewed everything Dennis and I had catalogued and raised an eyebrow and said she was planning ahead. I said, or Derek was advising her. Patricia's eyebrow went higher. We filed within 10 days of my walking out. The papers reached her on a Thursday. I know this because Garrett's sister, who worked base administration and had no specific loyalty to either of us but a healthy disregard for infidelity, let me know. I'm told Rebecca stood in her office for a full minute after the courier left. I felt satisfaction at that, clean and uncomplicated. Then I made my next move. Natalie, Derek's girlfriend, was easy to find. I didn't approach her vindicatively. I approached her as one person who deserved the truth telling another person who deserved the truth. I found her through the hospital's public directory and sent a single, factual email with 2 attachments, a screenshot of Rebecca's phone records, legally obtained through our shared plan, both our names on the account, showing the call volume between her number and Derek's over the past 4 months, and a photograph, which Garrett's sister had mentioned existed, of Derek's car in our driveway on a Saturday I'd believed my wife was at the base gym. I didn't add commentary. I didn't ask for anything. I signed it Liam and pressed send and went back to the structural analysis report I was working on. Natalie apparently confronted Derek that same evening. I heard about this through the same informal network, because small military communities are gossip ecosystems, and news travels at the speed of phone screens. Derek had attempted to minimize. Natalie had, by all accounts, been spectacular in her response. She left. She also, before she left, apparently forwarded my email to several people in their mutual social circle with a succinct message of her own attached, and by the following morning the story had reached a significant portion of the Fort Kellerman social community. Military communities care about character. They care about it structurally, because the entire institution runs on trust and integrity, and an officer who conducts a 4-month affair with a married subordinate's wife, while that wife is also his commanding officer, is not someone whose career weathers that revelation quietly. I didn't file an official complaint. I didn't need to. Patricia sent a carefully worded letter to the base's legal office noting that as part of divorce proceedings, certain information about the circumstances leading to the dissolution of the marriage might be relevant to official records. That was enough. A JAG investigation is a quiet, grinding thing. Derek was placed on administrative review within 3 weeks. Rebecca, as the ranking officer in the relationship, faced the heavier scrutiny. The affair between an officer and her direct subordinate, even an adult, consensual affair, carries specific consequences in the military code of conduct. I didn't orchestrate this. I simply told the truth through proper channels and let the institution respond to it, which it did, thoroughly. Rebecca called me 14 times the week the investigation began. I let every call go to voicemail. Her messages started composed and escalated to desperate with a consistency that I found, I will admit, deeply satisfying. The 3rd message said, Liam, please, you don't have to do this. The 7th said, you're destroying my career. The 11th said things I won't repeat, not because they hurt me but because I've decided they don't deserve space in my memory. The 12th said simply, I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve anything. But I'm sorry. I listened to that one twice. Then I deleted them all. I hadn't contacted her to destroy her career. I'd contacted people who deserved the truth, through proper channels, and let consequences be consequences. That distinction mattered to me then and still does. There's a difference between revenge and accountability. I pursued the latter and let the former happen as a byproduct. But I'd be lying if I said I minded. I also called my mother. This might seem small compared to the other moves, but it wasn't. My mother had adored Rebecca with the specific and total devotion that mothers sometimes give to daughters-in-law who outshine their expectations. She'd displayed Rebecca's promotion photo on the mantel. She'd bragged about her to every person she encountered. Telling her felt like the heaviest call I had to make. My mother, who was 64 and ran a garden center and was the kindest person I knew, listened to the entire story without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Did you get frostbite treated?" I said yes. She said, "Is your ear going to be okay?" I said probably, the doctor thought so. She said, "Good. Now, what do you need from me?" I needed her to know. Because Rebecca had used my mother's warmth as cover for years, as evidence that she was embedded in a loving family, that she was cherished and stable and supported. And my mother deserved to know who she'd actually been dealing with. Also, practically, because my mother was friends with 2 women in our extended family social circle who had social relationships with people connected to Rebecca's life, and information shared between friends travels in ways that matter. I'm not proud of that calculation. I include it because I want to be honest about what the cold version of me was capable of, in those weeks, running on hurt and precision. My mother called me 2 days later and told me she'd removed Rebecca's photo from the mantel and donated the frame to a church rummage sale. "I thought you should know," she said. "For closure." "Thanks, Mom," I said. "You're my son," she said. "There's no version of this where I'm not entirely on your side." The divorce settlement took 4 months. Patricia was aggressive and thorough, and Rebecca's JAG officer, who was dealing with the professional investigation simultaneously, couldn't give full attention to both. We came out of it with a division that Patricia called significantly favorable. I won't itemize it. The practical result was that I walked away from 11 years of marriage financially intact, which was not the outcome Rebecca's prepositioned financial structure had been designed to produce. I moved into my own apartment in March. 2 bedrooms, on the 4th floor of a building with a gym and a south-facing window in the main room where the light was extraordinary in the late afternoon. I furnished it slowly and deliberately, choosing everything myself, and the process of assembling a home that was entirely mine was more therapeutic than I anticipated. Every object was chosen because I wanted it. Not because it fit someone else's aesthetic or matched furniture chosen by committee. The couch was orange. I had always wanted an orange couch. Rebecca had vetoed it twice in our marriage. I bought an orange couch on a Wednesday afternoon and sat on it that evening watching a game I cared about without anyone else's preferences to factor in, and it was one of the most contented evenings I'd spent in years. I started running. I'd been an intermittent runner before the marriage, had let it lapse during the military spouse years when Rebecca's schedule absorbed the household's energy. I started again in March, and by June I was running 6 miles every morning, and the physical transformation was rapid and almost startling. I'd been soft in the comfortable way of men who sit at desks and eat whatever's convenient. By summer I was something different. The remote contract work had continued through everything, my clients hadn't known or cared about my personal life, and in April I leveraged the contacts I'd maintained carefully during the marriage to pursue something I'd set aside, the partnership track at Meridian Engineering, a firm based in Denver that had courted me 3 years earlier. The contact there was a woman named Sandra Yee, who'd been persistent then and remained interested now. I flew out in May. The conversations went well. By July I had an offer on the table that was, in concrete terms, the most significant professional opportunity of my career. I took it. I was 39 years old, I had an orange couch and a 4th-floor apartment and 6-mile mornings and a partnership offer in Denver, and the most recent chapter of my life, the one that had defined me for a decade, was over and the next one was beginning, and I found, to my own surprise, that I wasn't afraid of it at all. I ran into Derek in August. I want to be precise about this because running into implies accident, and it was somewhat constructed on my part. I knew from the network that he frequented a specific coffee place near the base on Tuesday mornings, and I had a Tuesday morning meeting nearby. Let's say I arranged the odds. He looked bad. He'd always been the kind of man who carried himself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to being the most attractive person in the room, and that quality had entirely vacated him. He was in civilian clothes, which, given that he was nominally still on base roster during the investigation period, was itself a statement. He'd lost weight in the wrong way, face drawn, shadows under his eyes. He was sitting alone with a coffee and staring at his phone with the expression of a man going through something. Good. He looked up when I came in. I watched the exact moment he recognized me, a physical flinch, like touching something hot. He started to stand, some combination of military reflex and the human instinct to face things on your feet, and then seemed to think better of it. I ordered my coffee, took it from the counter, and walked to his table. I sat down across from him without being invited. He looked terrible up close. "Derek," I said. "Liam," he said. I want to say I'm sorry." "You don't have to," I said pleasantly. "I know you are." Natalie left. Your review board convened last month. You're looking at minimum a grade reduction and probably a lateral transfer to a posting you didn't want. Your professional network in this community has been watching the situation. I know you're sorry. He stared at me. Are you enjoying this? I considered the question seriously, because it deserved a serious answer. I walked 2 miles in 14-degree weather in dress shoes, I said, while your career was still intact and you were a man with a girlfriend and a rank and a future you felt good about. So yes. I'm enjoying this some. Rebecca, she pursued me, he said. I know that doesn't matter, it doesn't, I agreed. But for the record, I believe you. She's good at identifying what people want to hear. He looked genuinely pathetic and I did feel a small pang of something, not sympathy, but a brief recognition of the fact that he was a person who'd made a disastrous decision and was living inside the consequences. What happens now, he said. Is there more coming? Not from me, I said honestly. I told the truth to the people who deserved it and let the institution do what it does. I'm not managing your consequences anymore. I stood up. Take care of yourself, Derek. Learn something from it. I picked up my coffee and walked out and felt, as I pushed through the door into the August morning, precisely like a man who'd resolved something. The final encounter with Rebecca I hadn't planned at all. It was October, a full 10 months after Highway 9. I was in town tying up logistics before the Denver move, my apartment lease ran until November, I had overlapping contract work to close out, odds and ends. I was at the farmer's market near downtown on a Saturday morning, which I'd started frequenting in the spring because it turned out that I liked farmer's markets, which was a thing I'd never had occasion to discover while Rebecca's schedule determined our weekends. I was looking at winter squash when I felt someone watching me and looked up and there she was. She looked different. Not destroyed, Rebecca was too structured a person to be destroyed, but diminished. The investigation had been resolved the month prior with a formal reprimand and a reduction in command responsibilities that stopped short of rank reduction but effectively ended her trajectory toward the position she'd been tracking. She'd filed a transfer request to a different posting, which I'd heard had been granted. She was leaving Fort Kellerman. This was, apparently, the last month she'd be here, and here she was at the farmer's market on a Saturday. She looked at me across the squash display with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, or at least never directed at me. I looked back and waited. She came around the table. She was wearing civilian clothes, hair down, and she looked tired in a deep way that went beyond sleep. Liam. Her voice was careful and low. Rebecca. You look, she stopped. Started again. You look really well. I am, actually, I said, which was the truth. I'm transferring. In 3 weeks. She waited for my reaction and when she didn't get one, pressed on. I looked for chances to say something before I left. I didn't know if you'd want that. I wasn't sure I had the right. You don't, I said, not unkindly. But I'm listening. She took a breath. This was Rebecca, who had delivered briefings to generals, who had commanded units in genuinely hostile conditions, and she was standing at a farmer's market with visible difficulty saying what she was trying to say. What I did to you it was unforgivable. I know that word is exactly right because you can't forgive it, I've watched you and you won't, and I know you well enough to know you're not withholding it strategically. It's genuinely gone. She looked down. I used your trust like it was infinite and I found out it had a limit and by the time I found that out I'd already hit it. That's very accurate, I said. I'm sorry. I know the word is worthless. I know you know I'm sorry because every single thing I had that I valued is gone. I know you know. She met my eyes. I just needed to say it to your face once. I had thought about this moment, or versions of it. I'd imagined cold speeches and surgical dismissals and clever finalities. Standing in the October morning with the leaves coming down from the maples along the market street and the weight of 10 months behind me, I mostly felt the absence of feeling. Not numbness, I'd healed enough to know what numbness felt like from the other side. Just completion. The way a book feels after you've read the last page and closed it. I'm moving to Denver, I said. I made partner at a firm there. I signed the offer in July. I watched her absorb this, the career advancement, the distance, the forward motion of my life. I run 6 miles every morning. I have an orange couch. I learned to cook actually well in the past year. I paused. None of those things have anything to do with you, except that you leaving made the space for them. So in a very specific and particular way, I want to thank you. She flinched. Not for hurting me, I clarified. For clarifying who I was married to before another 11 years went by. That's actually a gift, even though you didn't mean it as one. Liam, I don't have any anger left, I said. I want to be clear about what I mean by that, because I think people sometimes hear no anger and interpret it as forgiveness or openness. It's not. It means I moved far enough away from you that I can't sustain the energy. You're not worth my anger anymore. You're not worth much of anything I have to offer. I picked up a butternut squash and put it in my bag and looked back at her. I hope the new posting works out. I hope you find a way to respect the next person who trusts you. And I genuinely never need to speak to you again. I turned and walked toward the next stall. She didn't follow. I didn't look back. 10 months earlier on a dark highway I'd started walking and I hadn't stopped, and now I kept walking through October light toward the rest of my life, and it felt entirely natural, the most natural thing in the world, this walking away. 3 years later, I'm writing this from an apartment in Denver with better light than anywhere I've ever lived. I've been a full partner at Meridian for 2 years. We bid on a federal infrastructure contract last quarter that would be the largest project in the firm's history, and preliminary conversations suggest we're in strong contention. I run every morning, shorter distances now but consistent, and I'm in better physical condition at 42 than I was at 30. I've been seeing someone for about 8 months. Her name is Corinne, and she's a landscape architect who is difficult and opinionated and certain of what she wants, and she is nothing whatsoever like Rebecca, and I don't mean that as a compliment to one or a condemnation of the other. I mean they're different people. The point is that I was careful. I was slow. I let Corinne be a person I got to know rather than an architecture I needed, and the result is something that's real and stable and mine in a way that feels healthy. We argue about things that matter and resolve them because both of us want the thing to work. That's the whole secret to it, I think. Two people who actually want the same thing. About Rebecca, I hear occasional updates through channels I don't seek out and don't close. The posting she transferred to was apparently not a good fit. Her command responsibilities remained curtailed. She's left the military as of last spring, which given that her career was everything surprises me less than it should. I heard this the way you hear about weather in a city you used to live in, with the mild interest of someone who once cared about that forecast. About Derek, I know nothing and have no desire to. The orange couch is in Denver. It's in front of a window that faces west, and in the evenings in winter the light turns it almost red, and I sit on it sometimes after runs, stretched out and tired in the good way, and I think about that highway. About the specific quality of cold and dark and the specific moment I understood what had happened and what I was going to do about it. I put one foot in front of the other for 2 miles and then I kept going. The only thing that walk cost me was a marriage that had already been a lie and an ear that healed fine by February. Everything since has been mine.